Hi, welcome to my session on building useful tools to enhance the user experience. My name is Jeremy Saunders and I've been in the IT industry for some 35 years now, 22 of them working with Citrix products. Seems like a very long time. One of the biggest challenges for any Citrix customer is to reduce the service desk calls and user downtime. I had this vision to empower users to clear and or recover their own sessions by creating a tool that enables even those that struggle with technology to get themselves back up and running in the shortest possible time. In this session, I will showcase the solution I built for the Citrix community and my employer, which is a web service written in C# and a client interface, HTML client interface, to present information in a readable and friendly format to the users. The key takeaway for this session is really simple. You don't need to be a developer to build projects with basic and advanced levels of programming. You just need to have a vision and be able to be prepared to learn. Coding is fun and can be very addictive. So the tool is simple. It's just a web interface that the users go to. It greets them, gets their username from Active Directory, presents them with a drop-down list. They select from the drop-down list the Citrix site they want to go to and enumerates their sessions from that site. From there, they can then take the necessary actions they need. The design goals behind the tool was to create a tool that is easy to use even for users that struggle with technology, as I've already mentioned. You don't want to create something that's hard and clunky. Create a tool that enables users to not only get themselves back up and running in the shortest possible time, but also reduces the reliance on service desk and second level support teams. The last thing you want is for a call to be stuck in a queue for longer periods of time, and for the user not to be able to get to do their work, especially when they're under deadlines themselves. So you need to appreciate that and make sure that we reduce the service desk burden. Create a tool that does not rely on any ICA/HDX connectivity to any Citrix platform. This is extremely important because we all know that Citrix Receiver and Citrix Workspace app can get stuck trying to reconnect to broken or disconnected sessions. And therefore, you can end up in this endless loop of failure if you're trying to publish some other process in order for the users to reset those sessions. So I really wanted to extract the need not to have the ICA HDX connectivity in play here. So therefore, the user connects to a web service, and on the back end, that web service manages the resetting of their sessions. Wanted to create a tool that allowed the support of multiple Citrix virtual apps and desktop environments or sites. This is simply was a requirement for my employer, and I know many other environments that would have multiple sites as well. It makes it simple for the user. The users will know what site they're using, and they can select that from a drop-down list. I wanted a tool that works across trusted domains. That was really important, especially in a large global environment where you have a forest and multiple domains such as Americas, APAC, EMEA, etc. I wanted a tool that works across IT and OT. So, typically in an OT environment, you might go through a NetScaler gateway to get into an OT environment, but I didn't want to overcomplicate it by using the NetScaler gateway. So instead, we can just publish a web service through the NetScaler as an ordinary web service, and this tool would work in that fashion. I wanted to create this with APIs and a web front end. Really, if you're creating a web service, a web API is the modern way to do it, and that was my goal, to make sure it's modern and coded correctly. Create a tool that's easy to be extended and expanded for other use cases. Create a tool that's modular so that other brokers can easily be added. And create a tool that can be enhanced, debugged, and supported by others, rather than the burden being on yourself to enhance and manage it all the time. So here's a code overview. Well, basically, the architecture follows the model view controller process. The screenshot on the left is Solution Explorer from Visual Studio. Index.html is our view, and this is the web front end. that uses HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and jQuery to display the results from AJAX calls made to the controller. The controllers, they handle the incoming HTTP requests, initiate some functions to get and action the data, and send the responses back to the caller being where the AJAX call came from. Models contain objects and classes that represent the data in the application that is sent back to the user. So in this project, other than the default web API structure and some references and some scripts, really there are 6 files that we will run through, 5 of which have code in them, and 1 is just a configuration file. The configuration file is the Citrix sites.xml file, which contains a list of all Citrix sites and is the only file you'll customize for your environment when you download the tool. It contains a list of sites, as you can see in front of you. Each site contains a friendly name, just in case you've branded your environment to something the user knows differently to the site name, but you can duplicate the site name into there as it is. The name is the real site name. The delivery controllers are a list of comma-separated delivery controllers for that environment. The port number is the port number is used for we do an XD ping against the delivery controller to the register port to make sure the delivery controller is healthy before we try and run PowerShell commands against it. Of course, we don't want to start running the back end of this tool connecting to an unhealthy delivery controller. The default node is used if you want to set one of these sites to the default, so it will automatically select this site when the user opens the web page. The include delivery groups and exclude delivery groups are used, so we can actually go and we don't have to apply this across the board. We can certainly go through and exclude. And if you noticed in the screenshot here, I have the 2 bottom sessions are grayed out, and that is because they are in delivery groups that are excluded from use within this tool. You've still got to enumerate them, of course, and display them here, because otherwise users will get confused. But if you look at the bottom line of the actions you can take instructions, it basically says that these sessions are grayed out and you're unable to select them. It has purposely been excluded from this tool by design. You will need to contact the service desk or an appropriate support team for assistance, because they might contain sensitive data, or you might want to be able to triage some issues before, rather than allowing the users to self-service themselves. The other 5 files within the project is the Citrix Sessions Controller CS. This is a controller that has approximately 860 lines of code that exposes actions methods of the Citrix sessions that will be called when the API receives requests through the route API CTX session. It also contains private functions to retrieve data and get set properties variables to be returned by the action methods. This is where we run, the PowerShell command that's from. A model containing CTX sessions.cs is a model containing the class definitions CTX sessions, and you'll see what that is when I go through and demonstrate. User processes controller. It's a separate controller to the Citrix Sessions controller because I wanted to modularize it. So the user process functions, the get processes and terminate processes, are held in this particular controller. This is a controller that has 440 lines of code that exposes action methods for user processes that will be called when the API receives requests through the route API user process. It also contains private functions to retrieve, get, and set properties and variables to be returned by the action methods. And the user processes CS is a model containing the class definitions for the user processes. The index to HTML, as I went through before, is the client-side UI. It's got 1,115 lines of code. Crazy, really, but I coded it pretty raw, so I didn't use a lot of jQuery widgets that you can get, fancy tables and stuff like that. I coded it all in raw JavaScript and jQuery. So therefore, because it was really part of my learning process. So in order to code any application, you need to start with process flows and designs on how you want the code to work. So you lay out simply the different flows that a user will do, the actions they will want to take, and then you work out how they will be called and how they will be coded. So there are 7 process flows to this application, to this point, and I'll go through each one of them. So the first process flow is what happens when the user opens the web page. On document load, it gets the logged on username. Although it's not really used for any further calls, it's just really good information and good confirmation that IIS authentication is working. Helps you with debugging. That uses Ajax to make a HTTP GET request to an API Citrix session get logged on username method. That calls a private function which basically gets the username from the IIS authentication process. He then gets a display name from Active Directory in the format of first name, surname, and greets the user. This makes an Ajax call in the form of a HTTP GET request to API CTX session get display name method is called, which calls a private function and returns display name in the format of first name, surname. And that private function actually calls another private function to get the username from the web service as well. So we're not passing the username at all outside of the controller itself, and it's all done privately. Therefore, it's secure. It also gets the list of sites to build the drop-down list from the CTX sites.xml file, as you saw before. So that makes an Ajax call, a HTTP GET request, or to API CTX sessions get site list method, which is a private function which basically opens the file, opens the XML file, reads it, and then passes the array of sites back as JSON objects. It also disables all the buttons. This happens on document load, and we do that because obviously there's no data in there for the user to action. We don't want them pressing buttons at this stage because they might get erroneous errors, which will add to the confusion. And of course, all the API calls and return data is logged in the network and console tabs of the browser development tools. So let's demonstrate that. So when a user goes to the web page, this is what happens. It greets them, which is their name it gets out of Active Directory. It then builds this drop-down list here of Citrix sites. I bring up the browser development tools and show you that. I refresh that page. It's made three API calls, get logged on username, display name, site list. If you click on each one, you can get the header and you can see this is the call it made, and the preview data got my domain name site username for Active Directory. Likewise, display name. This is the URL. This is the call it made, and the preview. The data return was my name. Get site list again. The header got get site list. The preview is a list of all sites, and each of their data and all their properties are within each site. If you go to console, similarly, when we open the page, we've got my username, got my display name, and also a list of sites displayed here. You'll see here, very similar to the network tab. The next process flow is get sessions process. So from here, the user will select from the drop-down list. Then we take each of the properties behind that drop-down list of the site they select and select them as variables and set them as variables, sorry. So this will be the site name, delivery controllers, and port. We then call the get sessions function within JavaScript to get the sessions from the selected site. This makes an Ajax call in the form of a HTTP GET request to API CTX sessions get sessions method with the URI that contains site name, delivery controllers, and port. And then that calls multiple private functions to return a list of CTX session class, which is a list of the sessions. The CTX session class is defined as a list of properties made up from the output of the get broker sessions, get machine broker commandlets, as well as a custom property called include. The include property is determined by the include delivery groups, exclude delivery group elements of the site in the XML file. It then builds and displays a returned list of sessions into a table, and it enables all the buttons so the user can take action on them. This time, the difference is the user will get a dialog modal status in the screen to tell them what it's found and what it's doing. And again, all the API calls and data are returned in the network and console tabs of the browser. Demonstration of that. So here we are at the default page. If we drop down this list to my Citrix environment, there's the modal box. It says 5 sessions were found, and there they are. You can either click the OK or click away, and there they are, ready to action, and these buttons are all enabled. So if we hit F12, so we've got the development tools up, and we go through that process again. So here you can see the call made. This is the call made, and you can see what we're passing in the URI. We're passing the site name, delivery controllers, and the port number. The preview of data, you can see all the sessions that I have are listed here, and all the properties of the session are listed here, defined in the class. Back on the console tab, you can see here we selected the IO app site. We select these are the delivery controllers and the port number, and this is what we got back is the sessions for that site. So the first and the simplest action for them to take is to log off their sessions. They can select one, multiple, or all sessions listed, then select the log off sessions button. When they do that, it creates an array of machine names that are selected and passes that to the log off sessions function, which then makes an AJAX call. It makes a HTTP delete call to the API CTX sessions log off sessions method with delivery controllers, port, and an array of session names logged off to be passed in the body in JSON format. This represents the CTX sessions to action class, which calls a private function to log off the sessions using the stop broker session commandlet. Now, unfortunately, the stop broker session commandlet doesn't return anything. So we have to be a bit clever in the C# code, lots of try catches, lots of checking objects to make sure that we have absolutely nothing. Everything's null, and therefore you assume that the output has been successful. The log off sessions have actually, the log off sessions process has worked. So in the CTX sessions model is where we have the CTX sessions to action class defined, which is a list of custom properties used in the log off sessions, hide sessions, and restart machines methods. Again, a dialog modal is used for status messages and displays the progress for users. Let me demo that. So we're at this point. So we were last at this point where we enumerated all our sessions. We can select multiple or all. So I'm going to select the top one here, and we just select the log off sessions button. Now, before I do that, I'm just going to bring up the developer tools again. So I capture the network traffic and select log off sessions. The modal button comes up. My session's logging off in the background. Tells you here it can take a few seconds to complete. Refresh the page to verify. So for the moment, all I'm going to do is click OK and click away from it. So you can see here in the console tab what it's done. I selected that session and it told me it was logging it off, and it told me it successfully logged it off because it's returned no data to say it hasn't, and in fact it has successfully logged me off. The network tab, you can see it made the log off sessions call, logging off that machine, and successfully logged it off. In the header, you can see it called the log off sessions method, and in the body was simply the delivery controllers, the port, and the machine names. Only one machine name here, but you can see it's an array, so you can have multiple. So if I now go and refresh the browser, you'll see that I have one less session. Four sessions now, because that other session's gone. The next process to map out is the restart machines process. Again, you can select one, multiple, or all machines. When you call the restart machines, when you select the restart machines button, it calls the restart machines function, which builds an array of machine names that have been selected, and then makes an AJAX call. It makes a HTTP delete call, calling the API Citrix session restart machines method with the site name, delivery controllers, port, and an array of machine names to be restarted is passed in the body using in JSON format again, which adheres to the Citrix session classes to action class. Private functions are called, which runs the new broker hosting our action commandlets. The restart state can be returned from the output of that, and we do return that data. The thing with this particular commandlet is that it only supports Windows workstation machines, and it only supports single session machines. So therefore, we must run some criteria against each session to make sure that it meets those. So the machines must meet a certain criteria before they are even attempted to be restarted. So the OS type property must contain Windows. The OS type property does not contain 20, because I figured that all server names, 2008 R2, 2012 R2, 2016, 2019, etc., all contain 20. Workstation does not contain 20 because it's Windows 10 or Windows 8 or something like that. So therefore, it's not going to, it won't capture server OSs. The single session support property must be single session. So when it meets that criteria, it will then actually log off the session. Again, a modal dialog is created. Let's demonstrate that. So if I wanted to restart this machine, for example, you can see here restart supported is false, simply because it's a server OS machine. So it won't do that. But I can click restart machines, and it will try and restart it, but it says it does not meet the criteria to be restarted, so I can't restart it. But if I wanted to restart, say, the one above it, start machines are restarting. It can take a few seconds. It does a graceful restart, and not a forced restart. So the same as a log off, it can take a few seconds and refresh the page when ready. And likewise, page, select again, you can see it's still there, but I do know that it's logging off in the background. And there you go, it's gone. You just sometimes have to be patient. It's not instantaneous. The next process to map out was the hide sessions process. So again, the user can select multiple or all machines from the list that are from the list that are in the table. When they hit the hide sessions button, it calls the hide sessions function, which creates an array of machine names that they have selected. It then makes an AJAX call that makes HTTP put call. A put call is because we're modifying the machines. We're not deleting them. We're not clearing them. We're not getting information. We're modifying. So it's a put function. So we're calling the API Citrix sessions hide sessions method with site name, delivery controller port, and an array of sessions to hide, passed in the body using JSON format and represented by the Citrix sessions to action class. This simply runs the set broker session commandlet with the hidden parameter. So in order to be hidden, though, the machines must meet a certain criteria. We can't just have users hiding sessions for the sake of it. So we control only when they can hide them. So the machines must meet these certain criteria. So the registration state must be in an unregistered state in order for the session to be hidden. In other words, it'll be unhealthy because maybe the machine's hung, write cache might be full, maybe they've exhausted the RAM on that machine, who knows. Power state must be unknown or off. Usually if it's in one of those states, there's a problem. The power state is typically on when you're using power managed, or unmanaged if you're not using power managed. So unknown or off are bad power states. Or someone has put maintenance mode on, so there's an unhealthy machine that I want you using. You have the choice to hide that session and relaunch on a healthy machine. I guess the risk of hiding a session and relaunching is that if it's in maintenance mode and the machine is still operating, you might still have a locked license or locked data files. So really, the user needs to be empowered with a bit more information when making these decisions. So a demonstration of that. So you can see none of these sessions are hidden, but none of the power states are all on, the registration states are all healthy. There's no issue there. Maintenance mode is off. So I'm going to change the maintenance mode on one of these sessions now, demonstrate it. Okay, so if I re-enumerate the apps, so now you can see maintenance mode is on for this session. Therefore, it meets the criteria to be hidden. So let's try hiding this session first. Hide stuck sessions. It does not meet the criteria to be hidden, so I can't hide it. But let's try hiding this one. And again, we'll put the developer tools on. Stuck sessions, hiding sessions. Sessions have been hidden. Refresh the page to view. So we won't do that just yet. We'll just have a look at the call made. The call made was hide stuck sessions. And in the body of the call, we had the site name, the delivery controllers, the port, the machine names, and telling it to hide. And that's all there is to it. Preview, the response we get, and the console. What happens in the console is we selected the session. It told us this did not meet the criteria to be hidden. So we selected this session. It then told us it meets the criteria to be hidden, hiding session, successfully hidden session. So if we actually go and refresh that and look at our apps, we should now see that hidden is true. So this session is now hidden. So I could actually go now and launch Leapfrog again, and I'll get a new session, new machine. The next process to map out is the get processes function. This enables users to get the running processes under their name from the session host. So from here, the user selects a machine. They can only select one machine. If they try and select multiple, it'll come back and tell them that they can only select a single machine. So we call the get processes function from within the jQuery function. It makes an AJAX call, HTTP GET call to the API user processes GET method. The URI contains the machine name, and that simply just calls internally then private functions to return a list of user process class. This contains a list of user processes running in that session relevant to that user, and the data is presented very similar to Task Manager, as you will see in the demonstration. This returns and builds a list of processes in the processes table. The user process class is defined by a list of properties made up from the output of the .NET GET processes method extended with Win32 processes properties and performance monitored data. So let's have a look at that. So as I've hidden the Leapfrog session, if I wanted to actually have a look at the processes on that machine, I would click that button and get processes. But at the same time, I also want to open up the developer tools so you can see what's happening. Developer tools. Let's go up here and say get processes. And you can see here, it's just telling me to wait. Because at this stage, it's making a remote procedure call to that machine. And there we go, it's found 7 processes. You can see in the console here, the 7 processes are listed and all their data is listed. So geo.exe is Leapfrog. And you can see here the path, the command line is listed, all sorts of data there relevant to what the user might want to see. Again, in the network path, we made a remote GET request to that, when we passed it the remote host in that list. There's nothing in the body. It's basically the preview here of the data return. So again, this is the same as on the console page. What that does is that builds us now a table down here. This is the sessions table at top. This is the processes table below. But you must remember though that this is a one-time get. If you want to update, if you've got increased CPU usage happening, or if you want to see if memory is increasing on these particular processes, you have to hit the get processes button again. That data is only captured at the time when you run that process, when you run that remote procedure call to get that data. But here it tells you all the processes running, and you can simply select a process and then terminate that process. But that's what the get process gives you. It gives you as much command line data and as much description possible, so you can identify you might have multiple notepad.exes running, for example, that have multiple text files open, just as an example. Therefore, you might want to be able to identify which one you want to kill off, and you can do it this way. Now, the final process to go through is the terminate processes process. The user will select multiple processes from the processes table this time. They can select one, multiple, or all, in fact. It then calls the terminate processes function in JavaScript, which it passes an array of process ID using an AJAX call, makes an HTTP delete call to the API user processes terminate method with the machine name and PIDs passed in the body using JSON format. So it's interpreted as the terminate processes class, which is part of the user processes model. So let's see that in action. So again, we can terminate process. We can select our geo and terminate process, but again, I'm going to enable the development tool so you can see the network call it makes. So terminate processes. You can see here we had 7 processes. It's gone and terminated that process. And we select OK. So here what we did is we sent it that PID, and the termination result was successfully completed. In the header, we just ran the terminate method. However, in the body, we passed it the remote host and an array of PIDs, in this case only one PID. And in the console, you can see here, here's a selected host. Here was the array of processes we found. Here's the PIDs that we selected, and this was the output. So now if we go get processes, it actually, it won't find a process because that was the last process running before the machine was going to log off. So therefore, it's actually cleared the session. If we go here, we'll only have 2 sessions left. There we go. So the other way to do it is I can kill off one of these instead. So now we have a bunch of processes. So I'm going to kill off the Arangui process, terminate process. So we've gone from 13 processes. So if I now go get process, we've got 11 processes because a couple of another sub-process must have been killed off as well. And it's done. So a lot of the documentation is done by the default ASP.NET Web API help page. All the comments made within the code are then converted into documentation. It's pretty cool the way that works. If you go to it live, I'll show you a live demo. And there it is live. And there I can, get some more information on each one if I want to here. So where do you get the tool from? You get the tool from my GitHub site. Make sure you download the latest release always. Don't download the project unless you want to have a go at modifying it. But download the latest release. It comes in a zip file that you extract. All the instructions are on my website on a blog. The installation is quite simple. It requires IIS with Windows authentication enabled and anonymous authentication disabled. That's important. The installation of IIS itself, I've got that document on my website, which I'll refer to in a minute. The application runs under its own application pool, which is configured to run under a service account. That's really important because that service account requires permissions in order to take those actions on your behalf or the user's behalf. It requires a minimum of .NET Framework 4.5.2 to be installed on the web server, but this is covered off anyway by Citrix Studio installation. Citrix Studio, therefore, must be installed because the .NET, the underlying C# code, loads up the Citrix session broker admin v2 snap-in and uses the get broker session, get broker machine, stop broker session, set broker session, and new broker hosting power action commandlets. And that's all it uses. That's what Citrix Studio gives it. The service account needs to be a local admin on the web server. I haven't really figured out a better permission structure for that. The service account needs to be a help desk administrator in the Citrix sites, and that is it. You don't need any modified special permissions. It can take all the action it needs using those commandlets with help desk administrator permissions. The service account also needs to be a local admin on the session hosts to be able to remotely enumerate and terminate user processes if you want that functionality. So certainly read my blog. If you go to that URL, it contains lots more information, including the necessary PowerShell needed to install IIS correctly, and step-by-step instructions to make sure you get it right. Thank you for attending my session. I hope this tool will be of use to you, or the process I used to create the tool will help inspire you to create one as well, or something similar, or something different. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and Twitter, and I look forward to maybe answering some questions in the Q&A that are coming up in the next week. Thank you.